Winners and losers so far of the 2025 NBA free agency. Coming in as my top winner, this is a no-brainer. It's the Houston Rockets. When you look at the Rockets in their summer so far, they've added Kevin Durant, a bona fide #1 option. I don't care how old he is. I don't care if he's at the latter half of his career. He's still an automatic bucket, and he's going to be able to take that Houston Rockets offense to the next level. And then Raphael Stone goes out and acquires Dorian Finney-Smith. That's a great pickup for the Rockets because it allows their defense to not skip a beat after trading away Dylan Brooks, who was, I know some people don't really care for him, but he was somewhat of that heart and soul of the defense. You replaced him with Dorian Finney-Smith, who in theory should be able to add more offensively because he is a better shooter compared to Dylan Brooks. And I also like that they went out and got more depth. You get more around that center position that gives you more options. Sengun's going to be your bread and butter there at the 5. But then depending on the matchup, you can go with either Steven Adams or you can go with Clint Capella. Overall, with the Houston Rockets, I thought they did a good job of not only getting better by getting that #1 option, but they were able to still maintain their young players. You still have a Reed Shepherd who hopefully gets more playing time this year. And then you still have Amen Thompson. He's still a bona fide stud when it comes to defense. Offensively, he's still getting his jumper together, but we saw him make improvements being able to score from that dunker position. With Kevin Durant, those opportunities should still remain there. And now all he needs to do during the offseason is add that jump shot to his offensive game. And most importantly, Houston was still able to maintain their defensive identity. Like I mentioned, you have Amen Thompson. Then you go out and add Dorian Finney-Smith. Those are pieces that will allow this defense to still remain as, I believe, still a top 5. No less than a top 10 defense going into next season. With all that being said, I still believe the Rockets can still go out and add a shooter. They missed out on Luke Kennard as he went to Atlanta, which I'll mention a little bit later in this video. However, because they didn't give up too many assets in that Kevin Durant trade, they can still make a move, whether it be now or later into the season when they see how the team looks, to go out and get that bona fide shooter. On to my biggest loser in this offseason. I wasn't too much of a fan of what this team did, and that being the Milwaukee Bucks. Miles Turner is a solid big. I think he can potentially fit well alongside Giannis because you still have that 5 who can stretch out, and we already know with Giannis, he's going to do most of his damage down in the paint. With that being said, Miles Turner's defense has taken a bit of a hit. Because he still has that size, he can still offer you rim protection, similar to what Brook Lopez did during his tenure in Milwaukee. But the perimeter defense hasn't been the same for Miles Turner. You saw during the finals that when OKC was able to get those switches onto him on the perimeter, they were able to get by him. That led to easier buckets. And then on top of that, the way they were able to acquire Miles Turner was essentially waiving and stretching the remaining of Dame's contract for what I believe the next 4 or 5 years. So essentially, the Milwaukee Bucks are paying $50 million for the next 4 or 5 years to have Miles Turner, which I love Miles Turner. I think he could contribute on this team, as I've already mentioned, but that's a bit hefty of a price. And I know it was a mutual agreement with Dame and the Bucks organization, but again, you got to keep in mind, they're doing all this because they want Giannis to stay. Is this even enough for Giannis to stay? Because me personally, this team is not going to compete for a championship. They have the benefit of being out east, so the path is easier. So I can see this current status of the roster being maybe a top 6 team. Championship contending, I can't see that. This offseason could even get worse if Giannis decides there's not enough there for him to stay. Going into free agency, I thought Giannis was going to stay, but when they got rid of Dame, to me, that kind of signaled that they were moving forward in the process of potentially preparing for Giannis to leave, but then they did it for Giannis. It's kind of weird because I think if you want Giannis to stay, Dame definitely should still be a part of this roster. If this team doesn't make another impactful move, I can see by the end of the summer or sometime in the middle of the summer, Giannis winning out. As for my next winner, I'm going to keep it out east. Give me the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks are having a really great summer. They get Kristaps Porzingis on the low. You go out, you get Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He's a good combo guard. He can give you some great moments offensively and defensively. Then you get a shooter, Luke Kennard, who is a proven vet. He can add to the spacing of this team. whether he come off the bench or plays a little bit with the starters in certain moments. And then you can't forget about the trio of players that the Hawks have right now on this roster. Dyson Daniels, he's coming off of being named most improved player. Ricochet, I always struggle with saying his name, but Ricochet, one of the most potentially disrespected number 1 overall picks. He had a decent year, nothing too crazy, but it's better that he had a solid year because now he could keep growing and growing into being that number 1 pick. And then Jalen Johnson had a huge year before he went down with that injury. If he can remain healthy this season, he could be that second option behind Trae Young. On paper, the Hawks look like they could be serious contenders, but again, we got to see it to believe it. We thought the Hawks could be contenders when they went out and got DeJounte Murray. That didn't really pan out. Hopefully, with acquiring Kristaps Porzingis, he can remain healthy. And then with Trae Young, there is some pressure on him going into the season because this is a really good roster around him. He has the shooting. He has the defensive playmakers. He has a solid combo guard behind him in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. There's a lot on this team where Trae Young should be able to have success. He has a lot of threats in Okongwu and then the new draft pick out of, I believe, Georgia, and Asanu. They won the summer when it comes to the Eastern Conference teams. I thought they made the most impactful moves. Now we'll see if that leads to them being a top 3 seed out East. But the Hawks look good. This is one of the best teams around Trae Young, and it's on Trae Young to make the most of it this upcoming year. My next loser, I'm going to go with the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors, although they haven't made any noticeable moves outside of extending Jakob Poeltl, I just don't really care for this roster. And you guys probably have heard this all across the league when it comes to insiders and other YouTube personalities. But this Toronto Raptors team is mad expensive. And shout out to Numbers on the Board. I was listening to them talk about it. They had a great point where the Raptors have to pay extra to maintain their players. That means you overpay a Brandon Ingram, you overpay a Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Jakob Poeltl to some degree. Those are all solid players, but that's not a championship core. Maybe if you add a Giannis, who, again, might become available at some point during the summer. But outside of a potential superstar becoming available, this is not a good roster construction. And it's going to cost the Raptors a lot. I believe they're in the first apron, if I'm not mistaken, which comes with its penalties. And it's crazy because the Raptors are a team that on paper probably should be a top 6 seed out East. But now that I think about it, are they really a top 6? Because I have the Cavs over them. I have the Knicks. I have the Hawks, Detroit, Orlando. And honestly, it depends on Boston. I think Boston, as long as they don't trade away Derek White or Jaylen Brown, those two can be a good duo to keep Boston afloat. So I gotta give respect to them. The surrounding pieces in Boston aren't the strongest, but that's because they're just retooling, getting ready for JT to come back the following year. Toronto has an opportunity to be that top 6 seed, but I'm not entirely confident in them doing that. I want to end my video on a positive note, so I'm gonna just talk about my last major loser so far in free agency, and that being the Los Angeles Lakers. And this comes with a caveat. I don't really think they're losers per se. Now, they didn't really go out and get one of the big free agent centers. DeAndre Ayton is a big name because he's a former number 1 overall pick. But when it comes to production, Ayton's like, okay, he could give you a double-double every night. But it's really the impact that he'll have in the locker room and just his competitive spirit. The reason why I see the Lakers as a loser is because when you play in the Los Angeles market, there are expectations that you have to compete every single year for a championship. I don't really think that they could compete for a championship. When you have Luka and Bron, yeah, that gives you a chance to go out and win a championship. Realistically speaking, this roster is not championship made. Aforementioned Dorian Finney-Smith, the Lakers lost him, and that was their best perimeter defender. You tried to replace him with is it Levine? I'm sorry to my man. I don't mean to mispronounce your name, but again, not many people know about his game. Now, what I've heard about him is that he's a solid up-and-coming 3-and-D player. So We'll see what the opportunity looks like on a bigger stage for him. You have the whole LeBron James thing looming around the Lakers, where he essentially told Rich Paul, who then told the Lakers and the world for that matter, that if this team isn't a championship contending team in Bron's eyes, Bron might want out because he want to go out and compete in his last years. They didn't improve this roster. There's still some holes defensively. They could use some more shooting, and then we'll see what Aiden can do as the primary five. Jackson Hayes got re-signed, so he'll be the backup. But you have the whole Luka extension hanging over the franchise. You have Bron, who might request a trade out. And then you got to deal with Austin Reeves as well next summer. But the reason why I was hesitant in saying that the Lakers were a big loser is because it seems like the organization is looking at the long term rather than the short term. They know that right now that West is stacked and it's going to be difficult to win. I say that. I still think that Rob Pelinka can still go out and find a way to make this roster competitive in the short term. But I think the priorities are building around Luka. All right. For my last winner of free agency so far, this one comes with no surprise. It's the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets have had a phenomenal summer. They go out, they trade away MPJ, they get Cam Johnson. He is a 3-and-D player who the defense is kind of like okay. It's probably better than MPJ when it comes to effort. MPJ really was good defensively sometimes because of his size and athleticism. I think shooting-wise, is probably about even. Again, I've heard some people give the edge to MPJ because he has the height so he can shoot over guys, but we'll see how it plays out. But most importantly, what makes Denver big winners here in free agency is that they finally have depth behind Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon. They trade for Jonas Valanciunas, who, I'm not going to lie, he's going through a little situation. At the time of the recording, he's thinking about going to Europe to go hoop. I ain't gonna lie, he missing out on a potential ring because I think Valanciunas can give them 8 to 10 minutes. They finally have a legitimate backup center. That should help Jokic in terms of pacing him through the regular season, and then in the postseason, he should be able to get more breathers. We saw that be a problem this past postseason. Bruce Brown is a good get because during that championship run, he was crucial. He played well with both Jokic and Jamal Murray. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a streaky shooter, but if he's hot, you know, that allows you to have another guy who can shoot. Denver, after these moves, look like potentially the second best team out west. We'll see with the Rockets because I think the one downside for the Rockets is, again, shooting and then potentially their youth. We'll see how that plays a role in this upcoming season. But no doubt, the Nuggets are definitely in the top 3 out west right now. And we can't forget that they took the champs, OKC, to 7 games. So they made the improvements that were necessary. I did question whether or not Denver was really serious about winning and building around Jokic. Hey, they went out and they made me eat my words. That's going to wrap up this video. I appreciate you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.